Interesting. So there's always the theme of a very authentic encounter. So from the individual, right? So even doing the same movement for me and for you will maybe mean different things, or we're encountering different boundaries. But there's also obviously the theme of openness and exploration that comes back over and over with you. It seems like almost an ethos for you, a way of being, more than just about trying this movement or practicing this or that routine. You once gave the analogy, and I thought about it now when you describe, one individual just starting to explore with their own body. You gave the analogy, we can learn to make better chairs, or we can learn to grow the tree, right? So growing the tree obviously is much more open. It corresponds to an inner logic, right? Where it's connected to nature, whereas making the chair is more like we're making nature fit into the shape of a functional mental model, which of course has some utility, but in a way also violates a kind of inner nature of what the tree itself wants to become without any mental model at all. And it's this idea of leaving it wild, letting it go more and more until you say an essence is revealed because it was already there. So in the West, obviously, we live in a performance culture, right? And we're used to being told what to do, how to do it, how to excel. That's what everybody's kind of very using all of their words around. A lot of times it's these performance standards. And very early on in school, and then in the workplace, but also in athletics, right? Playing sports, like doing it the right way, in a sense. That's what we're all kind of trying to figure out. What's the right way? What's the right way of building a company? What's the right way of getting clients? What's the right way of playing this sport or that sport? In a sense, the opposite of growing the tree. What does the tree want to become, right? We just mostly want to become better chairs. And even then, sometimes our chairs are pretty bad and cheap. So I want to ask you, how do you approach this growing the tree as tree? So letting it loose, opening it up to its inner potential. Is that something you can even train for, or maybe invite in certain ways? Are there maybe a set of tools that you use yourself to keep kind of ready and open to allow things to unfold according to their inner logic? Or am I using too many words, and am I trying already to create the next prison of trying to define it?
Well, maybe it's the best use of ambition, and to turn ambition on itself, right? And to de-ambition ourselves, and to, well, I think like maybe the most important thing is a realization that just doesn't, I think just most thinkers don't go all the way through. As Osho said, in order to go beyond, you must go through. And I think like very often in terms of thinking about things, especially now in popular culture, we have deep thinkers, but not all the way through thinkers. So what we get is we get an illusion of what I want to do, the goals, doing it right, etc. None of this has any kind of connection to reality. It doesn't matter what you want to do, and also your goals don't matter at all. What happens when you reach your goals? Well, Fred, I'm sure someone like you already discovered, because those who actually reach their goals discover that the rat race of running after these goals is exposed in the moment of reaching them. And you can set other goals, but it will be limited. So anyone who really goes through and train, seemingly through doing, some kind of a doing, which is another subject altogether, but anyone who had success sees the downfall of those goals, Okay, I want to be an amazing musician. So I end up like Kurt Cobain. We know how that finished. So what is going to happen when you get the money? What is going to happen when you get the skill? What is going to happen when you get the wife? So all of this really doesn't work, which has been talked about and discussed by religions and by practitioners since the age of man. But we still don't get the message. And then you turn into empowering something other than yourself, a concept bigger than yourself that can provide you back with a certain power of evolution, expanding your boundaries. Because as long as the concept is within yourself, you're the one calling the shots, you're all the time very limited and you cannot grow as the tree grows. But when the tree is informed by nature around it, then this naturally unfolds. For me, that's the concept of being in practice or being a practitioner. And that also relates to movement. But here, let's say the big focus is on the word to practice. To practice is not to do handstands. To practice is not to play the violin. To practice is not to bake bread. All of these are practices and they can be used as a self-practice, but we are lacking something much deeper, a human practice, a Fred practice, an Ido practice. So for me, that is what I'm talking about. That is what I'm sharing. That is what I'm teaching. How to evolve ourselves, to grow ourselves by empowering the practice beyond ourselves. The first stage is to see our incapacities, our weaknesses, our issues, the things that we believe we possess, but we don't really possess, like the ability to do and, real uniqueness and stability, And these are things first to connect to see that maybe they're not there. Maybe we've assumed that they're there, and we were raised to think that they are there. But truly, even successful people like you or me, we know that we were allowed to succeed in certain scenarios. And if the scenarios were a bit different, we would not be allowed to succeed. And I've been in a lot of extreme scenarios this became very clear. And I think of myself as a very hard worker. I think of myself as a doer. Well, I used to think of myself, but in reality, that's far from the truth. And once you see that, you start to let go, to soften your approach, your hold of performance and goal setting, etc. And you start to look into something else and to soften it into it, to de-ambition yourself, to start to receive those powers. And funny enough, what happens is you start to really do in relation to before. You start to really receive. It's things just come to you, they unfold, and skills, success, people, whatever. And that is very powerful, and that is what I think we should teach our children, and what we should give our loved ones and ourselves.
It's funny because, when you ask these questions, you're kind of hoping for the little checklist, the little clear checklist. But the thread, the thread that you just pulled was just so clear to me from step by step. First of all, with so many things you said, but when you say about the success, when you achieve the success, and then the experience that you have with it, I actually wrote a novel about 10 years ago, and it was about this problem. It was the problem of not a failure, because failure protects you. Because when you fail at the goal, you can always tell yourself, oh, I haven't found the answer, but that's because I've failed. When I do find the answer, I still have I'm asking the right question, and I still have the right goal. But what happens when you succeed and you don't get what you're supposed to get? That's the real existential despair. And it's something that happened in my life over and over as a result of having the false goals, or having just, let's say, reducing life to maybe certain performance goals or career goals, or just having the wrong goals, as you say, the self-contained goals. And for me, where that exploration led me is exactly when you mentioned the tree, when the tree starts to realize it's part of a forest, let's say, or part of a community. It's the interdependence, it's the contribution, is being embedded in something way broader than just these little goals that we tell ourselves, or that we received from a teacher, or that we received from a school. And that's the only place that can go. And then when you say about starting with seeing our weaknesses and our incapacities, I've often had this thought that it's funny you hit all those notes in that little exploration. It's very hard to, I feel, to transcend a limitation if you're not aware of it. So for that reason, I've always felt that humility is the first rung of transcendence.
Yeah, it's possible. It's actually impossible because you believe you possess it. So how are you going to get it if you already think you have it, right?
Exactly. And so I was literally getting chills when I was hearing you go through that exploration. And it's very, very powerful. In a way, the tree does not decide how to become a better tree as it's becoming a better tree. It's just fully invested in that inner process, and it's not defining before being. So there's a clear approach there, I find. And
let me add something, just to, because I believe people are gonna, of course, immediately have some inquiries. I'm not suggesting something that turns into this passive thing. There is no kind of activity. No, we're not talking about that. We're not talking about some kind of a new age. For example, I'm the guy who is out there, I'm training physically 8 hours a day. If you include my stillness practice, it's like, 12 hours a day. I'm reading 3 to 4 books a week, and I have been for many, many years. So sinning, I'm not talking about some kind of a new agey disconnect from whatever. I'm talking about not falling into the traps of thinking you are in control. So it means I'm not sitting on the riverbank, I'm jumping in the water, but I'm also not trying to row my way upstream because there is no chance to row upstream because the stream is so strong moving down. So I navigate my little boat downstream. So it's fully active, but it's also aware of the powers that are surrounding us and our incapacities to really deal with it. So instead of falling into delusions of doing and delusions of achieving, etc., yes, you set goals in the traditional sense, but you are also involved with those goals in a much more deep and complex relationship than I'm going to do this. Many times the goal will be taken away from you, another goal will be presented to you, etc.